Ghost Pokemon. They're a popular type and one of my favourites, with their spooky colour palette and a ton of great merch. Especially Gengar. Gengar has had great merch. There is nothing to see in the Gengar merch. My fave ghost, though, is Polteageist. Not just because I'm British, and I drink almost nothing but tea, nor because he was introduced in the best Pokemon game, the one set in England. Everyone likes that one, right? For a while now, I've been enjoying Scarlet and Violet, and especially this little guy, so I decided to make a shoulder bag of him with a little resin teapot and a squishy silicone body so he can stay nice and round but have dangly, wobbly little legs. So, I'll just put this little counter up in the corner here. You get comfy and I'll get scrafty. So, we're starting off with a nice foam spiel for the body of the teapot. We're going to chop a bit off the top and then wrap it in some cling film. I understand Americans call it saran wrap. Why not leave it unwrapped? It's so all the little bits of foam don't get in my nice reusable clay. After adding some warmed clay to my pasta roller, I roll it out nice and thin, drape it on, and it's time to bring out the heat gun for a quick blast choice. Being careful not to torch it. Whoa, Buffett. Brush all the little bits of clay off and it's left nice and smooth. Now we need to scratch in some guidelines for the decoration on the teapot. I'm marking the centre line first with some string so it fits the curve of the ball. It's a good low-tech solution anyway. Then joining up those marks with a ruler. The rim of the teapot needed to be joined on next. I put some more clay in my electric heater, gave it a good meltan until it was glistening in the light. Then I used a silicone clay tool to push it into the gap and glue the bits together. After a little bit more smoothing, I attached the bottom in a similar way, with a bit of melted clay. After attaching the bottom rim of the pot, I decided it needed a little bit more bulk to it to flare it out a bit more. So I added a bit more clay and used some of my shaped loop tools to carve it down. Once I was happy with the shape, I needed to mark out the loopy patterns so that they were evenly distributed across the pot. I used different curved objects from around my office to make them consistent, and leave just a whizmer of a guide for etching by hand. Okay, so I did one circle, and if only I could mimic you. Ugh, drat, Eenie. I cut out the scalloped shapes for the top of the pot with a scalpel. Beware! It do be sharp though. Just a little knife will do, no need for a cleaver, that'd be overkill. Once again we heated the clay to attach a new piece, being careful not to char. Rizard, okay? Then there's more etching to do of the big loops. They didn't come out perfect, they kinda needed to be curlier in places. It's okay, little loops. You came out looking a bit shiftery, but I still rate you highly. After I'd etched all those bits in, I added the authenticity mark to the base. In case you don't know, there's two different types of Polteageist and the pre-evolution Sinistea, which is shown here in some footage from a PokeTuber I watched quite a bit, and partly inspired my love of this Pokemon. I fall asleep to your shiny quiz videos quite a lot, they're just so cozy. Oh, but yeah, The stamps. There are 1 in 100 chance, but the only difference between the phony and authentic forms is the stamp on the base. Next, I added the spout. It's a bit droopy at the moment, but until it cools down I can't scrap it. After it cooled, and I blended it into the body a bit more, it's looking much better. Now, the teapot our little ghost floats around in is old and not without damage. There are some parts where a shard has been lost and you can glimpse the ghostly goo me inside. So, knowing the clay is pretty thin, we can just cut out a slice and carefully remove it, revealing the foam and film underneath. Time to make the handle. If you're gonna guess it's totally floppy and looks weird until it's blended, you're absolutely correct. After adding that, we cut out the missing shard from the other side. Now that's satisfying indeedy. Next, we needed to make the lid that he wears as a hat. I made it around a fillable Christmas bauble half, which I later removed for casting. I did the decoration in the same manner as the pot, test fitting it as I went along. Added a little mushroom on the top, and we were good to go. Okay, here's a progress check. Spin the model around, go on, one more cacturn. Partway through the process, I decided to make a little Sinistea as well, the little teacup that goes along with the pot. And to make the surface of the quote-unquote tea liftable as a coin purse to match the bag. Then I needed to heat more clay. Was 1 slap enough? Nah, 2. I added the trim, thanks again to my pasta roller, and then a matching authenticity mark underneath. This one I actually grabbed some footage of, so here you go. Sinistea has a little nub left of the handle of his teacup, and his spooky little arm emerges from a missing piece to grab onto the stem and complete the missing curve. So after adding what's left of the handle and cutting a slot for his arm to emerge from, I used the same technique from the loops on the pot to add his face. Once I'd marked it out with some sea dots, I went over it again with a slightly larger tool and made the lines bolder. Then I added the chip from the rim and gave it a quick brush with white spirit, which I think is called mineral spirits in the US, for an extra smooth finish. Speaking of white spirit, this is the PPE warning section, PSA. When I'm sanding or I'm using these chemicals, I'm always wearing my PPE, and you should too. Get a shield on those lungs. You might think that the odds of you having something happen, pretty far-fetched. But we're talking about some real toxicroak particles here. Yeah, we all know about like the coughing, the wheezing, getting drowsy, but gee, oh dude, it can get ghastly, so be careful out there. Okay, back to business. Next, we're making some silicone moulds of the clay pieces that are finished so far. The first thing we need to do is cut out a load of foam board to hold the liquid so we don't swamp it. Okay, so we've got a whole tangle of stuff here. Silicobra offcarts, mixing cups, the barrels of goop. I hate to admit it, but this amount of silicone costs a lot of money. Now pour, go on. Go on too. Sometimes you need to hit on top to get all the gunk out. but once everything's sunken into the silicone, we just need to eradicate the bubbles so we can go let them sit. Okay, we're back the next day. Now, do what? Oh, right. We need to apply a thin layer of Vaseline so that we can separate out the main body of the mould from the plug that we'll use to pour the resin into it with. Once that's done, we can pour in the rest of the silicone without fear of it merging with the rest of the mould. After another couple of hours, we're ready to peel off the foam board walls. Then once we're done freeing the mould, we can remove the clay we used. Sometimes you have to cut down the sides a little bit, but that's normal. You've just got to wiggle it. When all the clay is removed, we can do a test casting. I'm using a polyurethane resin that sets in a few minutes so I can make hollow parts by slush casting, i.e. that's adding a small amount, sealing up the mould and rotating it in each direction to coat the sides, and then kinda hoping for the best. Here I'm just propping it up, or the teapot at least, so I can fill the handle and spout in solid, as I think they create air pockets with the rolling method, and if that happened, it'd be all Snova. Our little Sinistea came out well. I didn't film all of the rolling the teapot mould around because frankly it was very heavy and made everything wobble, but I got a little bit of footage for you. You'll note that I sealed up the mould with a little bit of duct tape. After rolling it for a good while and then letting it set again, it's time to take a look at the pot. I honestly couldn't bay leaf it when it came out first time, but it did. It's good and solid, so now we have a little resin fortress, and we can sand shrew and drill burr into it, and get rid of the excess. Whoa, where's the shell gone? Oh, here it is. Let's have a look post-sanding. They're looking pretty great. It's a lovely creamy colour that was now going to be ruined as I cram more clay into them to measure for the silicone parts we're going to model next. We're using more warm clay in both lumps and sheets and letting it cool in place so we have a good base to start with for the ghosty parts of the project. For Sinistea, I'm going to purloin some more of the kitchen cling film to put between two blobs of clay. I'm only going to cast the top part so we can keep the hidden coin compartment hollow when closed. After the sheets of clay have been removed from the main body of the pot, they're trimmed, and then we're adding some wire to act as a structural girder for the legs. Then we're going to grab some small pinches of the hot clay and add the bulk to the legs, trying not to burn me fingers. Without those, I ain't worth a damn. I've made a big clay blob leaning to the side for the main trunk of our ghost, but I need to try it for size and make sure it's a snug fit. So I'm spreading on some warm clay and letting it set around the body, so when I remove it, I have a good shape to sit in the top without falling through into the pot. On its own, it's looking kinda oddish, but I won't be filled with gloom. I'll trust the process. Then it's more wire, more smoothing out, more white spirit, a test fit to make sure I put his face in the right place, and then it's on to carving out his eyes and mouth. This guy doesn't have one, so we're giving the nose a pass. I made the swirls of mystical ghost tea off camera as well, but they all get a sprinkling of melty chemicals at the end to minimise exposure time. One more blast with the heat gun and the face is applied. Finally he has some personality. Now we're on to the next big stage, making the plaster molds to cast our silicone into, as I don't trust myself to cast silicone into silicone. I mean, knowing me, I'd forget a spot and they'd merge into one huge useless solid cube. I start off by using a water-based air-dry clay to prop up my clay dolls, which, by the way, are a wax-based clay, so they don't stick to each other. Then cutting out some keys with my large loop tools, so I can more precisely stick the halves of the plaster molds together once cast. Now I've got to admit, looking back at my footage of the last part, Ivy saw that I didn't get a very good angle on this. Yes, we'll address it. Not only did I block the shot, but I'm also bloody ginger. Take my word for it, a very poor and thin plaster mold being reinforced with coconut fibre is back there. Again, I'm a ginger, and I don't like waste, but it's not my own hair in there, fear not. Meanwhile, over here, I've been out in the garden using my plastic primer on the resin pieces, and they're ready to be painted while the plaster is setting. I decided to do the regular colours rather than the Shiny's colour palette, as I'm more partial to the turquoise than pink. But he's an authentic stamp boy, so he's special anyway. We'll have a little break from me yapping, and we'll watch some painting for a bit. Now, I know you were wondering what metallic I was going to go for here, bronze or gold. By the way, now that we're over halfway there, let me ask you a question. If I had a VPN sponsor here, would I be able to say it's Hacksaw? We're nearly done removing the clay traces with our brush and water. the Vaseline came in handy again, as the upper halves of the moulds can be more easily separated with another dividing layer, and it works for both silicone and plaster castings that would otherwise just fuse together. Side note, always use wooden, or if you will, timber implements instead of metal picks so you don't scratch the plaster. If you're of a sensitive disposition, you might want to look away from this bit. I had to add some pouring spouts / air holes with skewers. Now, I know you're supposed to make plaster moulds 1 to 2 inches thick, but as I'm being a bit cheap and I'm probably not going to use these more than once to cast some soft silicone, I'm skimping a bit and not building up the edges as much as I should. And if you don't like how I did that, you can shop it. If you want to know how to actually make a good plaster mould, you should check out Brick in the Yard here on YouTube. They're professionals, and if you think I'm doing this right, you've been taught error. Jesus, that one was a reach. Okay, it's time to crowbar this mould open. This is always something that you can hear across town. Okay, now, we can't forget to give the plaster a soap wash before we cast into it, just to seal it so no mud gets in. Okay, let's strap the mould halves together and cast. So I'm pouring some higher quality clear silicone into a mixing cup, then combining some pigment colours. Once parts A and B are mixed until it gets all creamy, we can pour them out, and then in an hour we should get a cast form. I used a chisel to get the halves apart, and oh, what a surprise, we have some dangly little legs. But there's a problem. Confession time. Off camera I tried painting these first pulls from the moulds, but in the end I realised that they just didn't have enough pigment in them to start with, and if you just keep adding paint you get something that looks smeary, it loses definition, and it just looked like trubbish, like absolute garbodor. I nearly threw a massive tantrum, and it was just a real shame. I had a dark cry in my bedroom for a bit. But I didn't want to leave Annie undone, so I had to throw on my socks and get back to work. Thank goodness, because here we're seeing some real time growth. Version 2 came out really superior. Rayquaza? Now they need a trim. Taking a blade to your work always requires some bravery, but I can Diglett. In fact, looking at the results, I dug the trio. Next, painting the bright yellow details. Painting with silicone is really viscous and difficult, as it goes on in blobs and then slowly runs all over the place. In this case, I picked up a little bit of silicone, mixed it, added the pigments, and let it set a little bit in the cup to thicken it up first so that I didn't end up with a load of manky old dribbles. Now, I know you've been waiting a while, but nearly there. Time to begin assembly, so I first brush the top of the head with some primer so my glue can bond to silicone. Then we're going to stick the lid hat on. Gotta be nimble with this bit before it dries. Give them a good squish to create a good bond, and voila! I made some discs to go on the inside of the pot too, so let's get the scissors out and trim them to size. Now it's time to break out the pin curtain and sew the lining. I've got a stupid big collection of scrap material and I thought about going for a crazy busy print, but in the end I've settled for this ghostly purple sateen. I made some approximately sized pieces on Illustrator, printed them, and cut them out as I went along. Each slice of the ball shape is 1/6 of the circumference I estimated, so I'm going to attach 5 pieces together to start with, then make a longer 6th piece that I can glue to the underside of the body to keep everything in place when I'm walking along wearing the back. Here's how they look sewn together. Now, keep your ear on, we'll add that longer piece later. I did buy a bit of new material for this project, some faux leather. It's got a shiny plasticky top layer with a bit of stretch, and then underneath it's kind of cottony feeling. I also made some pattern pieces for the strap with a Pokeball motif, and some little spooky guys for decoration. I first glued the pieces in place, then I put them through my sewing machine. When you're sewing a plastic kind of fabric, you only really have one chance to get the holes in the right place because they're kind of there forever. Then I used my punch to cut the eyes out of my ghost shapes. I ought to have bolted this down to my desk, but I've not gotten around to it. After this little parade of spirits, I'm going to tack them down, and after that it's time to neaten up the edges of the strap for the finish and touch. After grubbing around for a bit, fletching to primer again, and finding a good brush, we're ready to put everything together. First we're gluing the Sinistea cup, then ditto to the teapot. I don't like using too much glue, as to me it always seems like a bit of a temporary solution, but there's not a lot of ways to do it in this case. Now we just need to carefully attach the lining, trim it up, attach the strap, and then let us rejoice, for we have victory bell. Without further ado, let's put this bag on, roll the beauty shots, and that's a dub. Well. Thanks so much for watching. Please enjoy this gallery of some of the other weird bags that I've made, albeit mostly a lot less cute than today's project. Now, I'm seeking your approval, so if I can improve, do rant in the comments below, although don't be a Marini. But you wouldn't do that, would you? See ya!